Welcome to In Focus. You know, the Supreme Court of Canada will hear the case between Trinity Western University and the Law Societies of British Columbia and Ontario on November 30th and December the 1st. The Law Societies in British Columbia and Ontario refused to accept graduates from the proposed law school because of Trinity Western's community covenant, which requires students to refrain from sexual intimacy outside of heterosexual marriage. They justified their decision by claiming it is not in the public's interest to allow a law school to exclude LGBTQ students. Trinity Western challenges the Law Society's decisions as a violation of their religious freedom under Section 2A of the Charter. And now this case comes to the Supreme Court with two provincial courts of appeal finding opposite conclusions. And we're joined by Andre Schutten from ARPA with his insight on this case. Andre, it's so good to have you here.
It's good to be back again.
You know, when we look at this case, does it sound unusual to you that we'd be back at this juncture?
Yeah, you know, Trinity Western already fought a case very similar to this just a few, not even 2 decades ago, about 15 years ago, when they had the same fight over their teachers' college. Yes. And in that case, 8 out of the 9 judges on the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trinity Western University. They said, doesn't matter that Trinity Western University has this community covenant, that's good for them. It's their religious freedom to have it, and they should be able to have their teachers' college.
Well, you know, and I find it interesting that we're now debating after it's been overruled, because one of the LGBTQ groups in Ontario said they were taken aback by the initial refusal, given that some were permitted to intervene in the case in Ontario. But then when it was overturned, they were also shocked. And I was wondering, from a layman's perspective, what are we really dealing with, and what's behind the scenes on this?
Well, actually, in Ontario and BC, since there's been appeals from both of those courts to the Supreme Court, Supreme Court's going to make a big decision here. It's a huge case, and there's actually 28 different interveners who applied to say we too want to make submissions on this big, huge case. And of those 28, one judge had to make a decision which of those 28 are going to come and make those other arguments. ARPA Canada was one of 9 different interveners who were approved to say, yeah, we want to hear your perspective as well. Okay. But over the course of a weekend, the Chief Justice decided, no, we're going to let all 28 interveners in. I'm not really sure why. There was no good reason given one way or another, but yeah, now 28 interveners are also going to be contributing to this case.
Does this take us all the way back to square one again?
No, not yet. So that's why the hearing is now 2 full days instead of just one. Typically, there's just one. But the 9 judges are obviously taking this case very, very seriously. 28 interveners, big deal. And then we'll have to wait and see. After the hearing, we'll probably have a decision out in about 6 months or so. And then we'll see, does this go back to square one?
What are the ramifications?
Well, they're pretty stark for a Christian community. There's a lot in this case. So if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Trinity Western, that's wonderful for Christian communities. It means that we can be Christian, we can define ourselves for ourselves according to Scripture, according to biblical values. But if the Supreme Court rules against Trinity Western, that's a blow to Christian freedom. It means that if you're going to be part of a Christian community that holds yourself to a biblical standard of living, well, then you're not so welcome in the public square anymore. And
by us not being welcome, is that indeed persecution?
I think so. I mean, it's the first steps of persecution. It's nothing. I would never compare it to what our brothers and sisters suffer in
around the world.
Yeah, around the world. I mean, that's horrific types of suffering and persecution. But what we see here, if the Supreme Court were to rule against Trinity Western, I'd see this is the beginning of a type of persecution. It's a marginalization. It's pushing Christians to the sidelines in professions like law.
But is it not propelling us also to the forefront and causing us to actually stand our ground? I mean, for those that are listening right now, when I heard this from a layman's perspective and from a frontline perspective, I realized that the way we bring this in focus is we now have to move into action as well. It's not enough to leave it in the court's hands and then hold our breath and sit on our hands. I really believe it's time for us also to engage the process and make sure that we write letters, make sure that we're calling, make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can. Andre, from your perspective, how could we support the process, and how could we assist from a layman?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, only lawyers can argue in court, but what we could really use is the help of all Christians to shift the conversation. We got to change the culture and the way it's looking at this issue. So, some of the law societies suggested that LGBT people are excluded or discriminated from TWU. That's in fact not true. There are gay and lesbian students at TWU. So let's have a conversation with them as well. Let's share their stories. Let's refocus our discussion about what does it mean to be part of a Christian community, and let's show through compassion and through winsome engagement with our communities, our coworkers, our neighbors, etc., that we are a loving community that wants what's best for all of Canada. And we should be able to have the freedom then to live according to biblical values within our own communities.
Absolutely, and we do celebrate the diversity as well, because we're not saying that they have to be, and any community has to do this or that per se, but we are saying that we reserve the right to believe and to practice the faith that we have laid our lives down and really believe that Christ has given to make possible. One more question with you. If they lose this, what next?
Well, we're going to have to work more, I think, at the legislative level, thinking through a legal political lens. We're going to have to work at the legislative level to see if we can't pass laws that say that we still protect Christian communities to live according to their own virtues, their own values. Because a legislature still has the right and the ability to overturn a court decision. Okay. So hopefully we could be able to shift things there. But again, the big battle is the cultural battle. So let's engage the culture. Any Canadian, any Christian can do that and be part of that. So I welcome all Christians to be part of that cultural shift.
Andre Schutten, ARPA Canada, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And that's your In Focus.